Okay, class 9, let's play a little game. And be careful because there is a chance that by the end of this game, you will have already started studying economics. So, are you ready? I'm going to give you different number of choices and you have to choose from each of the choices that I'm going to make for you. So, choice number 1, you have 500 rupees and there are two things you really want. You can either go out and enjoy your favorite food with your friends or save the money for those shoes you have been wanting. What would you choose? Don't tell me, just decide and comment down your choice in the comment section. Choice number 2. Now imagine your school library has received a fantastic new storybook and everyone wants to read it. But there are only 5 copies and 20 students want the book. Now what? Should the first 5 students get it? Or should everyone share it? Or should the school buy more copies? Comment your choice in the comment section. Choice number 3. Now you are a farmer. You have limited land, limited water, limited labor, and you can grow wheat or barley. Which one would you produce? Comment the answer. Choice number 4. Now forget the farm. Imagine you own a factory. You have to decide how to produce your goods. Should you employ more workers or should you use more machines and technology? Choose and comment the answer. Choice number 5. Okay, now I'm making you the government of a country and you have limited funds. What would you give greater priority to? Hospitals and education or roads, defense, and other priorities? Choose and comment down the answer in the comment section. Now, let me ask you something. What did these 5 situations have in common? They involved a student, a school, a farmer, a business, and a government. But they were completely different situations from one another. But the problem was exactly the same, and they had something in common. And that common thing between all of them was a choice to make. And that is where our new chapter actually begins with. So, hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Revise by Vidyashri Kadlibuddi, where we learn, revise, and succeed together. Today, we are beginning Class 9 Economics, Chapter 8 Building Blocks in Economics, the Problem of Choice. And before we learn a single definition, I want you to understand one simple idea. Economics begin with a problem that every one of us faces. We want many things, but we do not have unlimited resources to get everything we want. And therefore, we have to make a choice every time. And that is the basic idea behind this entire new chapter, chapter number 8, that we are going to study in your economics chapter. Let's come back to you. Think about everything you want. Maybe you want a new phone, better clothes, your favorite food, a holiday, a bicycle, a gaming console, or a new pair of shoes. And the interesting thing is, does wanting one thing make up stop wanting more other things? Usually, no. Our wants keep changing. Today, we may want one thing, tomorrow, something else. The NCERT chapter gives a simple example of this changing nature of wants. Someone may move from wanting a bicycle to a motorbike and then to a car. So, imagine our wants as a never ending list. But now, look at the other side. Do we have unlimited money to buy everything that we want? The answer is definitely no. Do we have unlimited land in comparison to the population that we have? No. Do we have unlimited access to freshwater resources? Definitely not. And do we have unlimited time? That's also a no. Do we have unlimited labor, capital, and technology? Right now, no, but in future we can generate them more, right? So our resources are limited can also be used for different purposes. And that's where the tension begins. Unlimited wants, but limited resources, and therefore we have to always make a choice. Okay. So now, when I say limited resources, don't immediately think only about poor people or lack of money. That's not the whole idea. Imagine you have the entire evening free. You have 3 hours You can do a lot of things out of it, like you want to study, you want to play, you want to watch your favorite show or talk to your friends, and maybe sleep early. Can you give these 3 hours to all of them at the same time? Think about this. And majority of you may be telling that this is not possible. You cannot do all of these things in just 3 hours, because even time is limited resource. So choice isn't something that happens only when we have less money. Choice happens because resources have limits and different possible uses. And that's why economics is much bigger than simply studying about money. Moving ahead, suppose you finally decide, I am buying the shoes. Great, right? But wait, what happened to the 500 you could have saved? What happened to the movie? What happened to the meal? You selected one possibility and left another behind. And that brings us to one of the most important ideas in this entire chapter: opportunity cost. The chapter explains that when one alternative is chosen, the value of what is given up is called as the opportunity cost. So whenever you make a choice, I want you to start asking yourself one question: what am I giving up by choosing this? That question is economics in action. Remember, our farmer, he has limited land, limited water, and limited labor also, right? Suppose he wants to produce wheat and barley together. If he moves towards producing more barley, he has to reduce some wheat production. The chapter actually gives us different combinations of barley and wheat and then plots them on a production possibility curve, which is also called as the PPC. Now, don't get frightened by the words production possibility curve and all. We will understand the graph properly later in this chapter. For now, understand what the graph is trying to tell us. With limited resources, producing more of one thing can mean producing less of another. That's the trade off. And that trade off is connected to opportunity cost. So, we have another important chain: limited resources makes us to make a choice, and choices usually lead us to trade off, and trade off usually is connected to opportunity cost. And keep this entire chain in your mind for the entire chapter. So far, we have talked about you and a farmer, but choices don't stop there. Imagine you are running a business. You have limited resources. You need to decide, what should I produce? And then how should I produce it? And then whom am I producing it for? Take something as simple as shoes. You could produce school shoes, sports shoes, office shoes, casual footwear as well. Different people have different needs, different taste, and different purchasing power. So, a producer has to think carefully about who the product is meant for. And the chapter uses these different kinds of shoes to explain the idea. And now our choices have become even bigger. And this brings us to the three questions that every economy has to deal with. What to produce, which means which goods and services should be produced in a country and in what quantity should they be produced. For example, should farmers produce water intensive crops such as sugarcane and paddy, or crops such as millets and pulses that use less water? There isn't always a simple answer, because every decision involves a trade off. Coming down to the next question, which talks about how to produce. Once we decide what to make, how should we make it? More workers, more machines, or more technology? And the chapter explains that the choice depends on factors such as the cost and the availability of labor and capital, technology, the nature of the product, and government regulations. And coming down to the third most important question of economics, which goes as for whom to produce. And finally, who will use or benefit from what is produced? Because people have different incomes, needs, taste, and lifestyles. A producer has to think about the consumers they want to serve. So remember these three: what, how, and for whom. These are not three random questions, they arise because The resources that we have on the earth are generally very limited. Okay, so individuals make choices, farmers also make choices, businesses also make choices. But who makes choices for an entire economy? Should the government decide? Should the producers and consumers decide through the market? Or should both have a role? And this is where our chapter takes us into the fascinating world of planned economy, which means where major economic decisions are primarily made by the central government and its authority. Then we go ahead with market economy, where decisions are mainly influenced by market forces such as demand and supply. And then we move ahead with mixed economy, where governments and private participants both play important roles. And yes, India's story is particularly interesting. After independence, India followed a more state led approach. Then came the economic difficulties of the early 1990s. And after the 1991 reforms, India moved towards a more market oriented system. While continuing to retain an important role for the government, we will understand that the journey later in the chapter. So now let's come back to where we actually started this introduction with the rupees 500, five library books, a farmer's field, a factory, a government's budget. Different situations, but the same fundamental problem. We have wants, we have limited resources, so we have to make choices. And once we make choices, we have to think about what we are giving up. That is why this chapter is called as the problem of choice. Now, let's answer the three big questions that the NCERT places at the very beginning of the chapter. Okay, so the first question is, what does economics actually deal with? The answer to this question is, it deals with how individuals and societies make choices about using limited resources to satisfy their needs and wants. Okay. Then moving ahead to the next question, that is, what are the key questions in economics? So the key questions we have already discussed now. Let me repeat for you guys. The key questions in economics go as what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Okay. And the third question is, how do different economic systems address these questions? So different economic systems organize and answer these questions in different ways. And that is what we will explore as we move through this chapter. So, class 9, from today, I want you to look at ordinary decisions differently. When you decide whether to spend or save, when your family decides what to buy, when a farmer decides what to grow, when a company decides how to produce, when a government decides where to spend, don't just see it as a decision. See the economic problem behind that decision, because economics isn't something that happens only in a textbook. Economics is happening every time a choice has to be made. And in this chapter, we are going to discover why we choose, what we sacrifice, how resources can be used efficiently, what every economy has to decide, and how different economic systems deal with those choices. Okay, so let's stop thinking of economics as a subject full of definitions. Let's start seeing it as a story of choices. Okay, so before I conclude about this in the entire video, let me show you a simple brief mind map of this entire chapter, which focuses on what are we going to deal with over here. So the chapter, this is the entire mind map of the chapter, which is very helpful for you to revise at the end of the lesson when it gets completed. We are going to start, and we have already started by answering the big questions now. Then we will start understanding what is actually economics, where we study about how people and government make choices and how do we deal with limited resources and unlimited wants. Then we will focus on the idea called as human wants, Moving ahead, we will understand the difference between needs as well as wants. Then we will study about how choices can lead to trade-offs. Then we will study about the economic systems, which includes planned economy, market economy, mixed economy, and all. And then we will come down to the key questions of economics, which is what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Moving ahead to understand the PPC curve, and then dealing with the idea called as opportunity cost, and then coming down how limited resources can be used for alternative purposes and all. So this is going to be your entire chapter called as building blocks in economics, the problem of choice. So like I told you, let's stop thinking of economics as a subject full of definitions. Let's start seeing it as a story of choices. I am Vidyashri and you are watching Let's Revise by Vidyashri Kadlibuddi. Learn, revise, and succeed. So let's begin our new chapter, Building Blocks in Economics, the Problem of Choice, in my next video. Bye, everyone. Everyone, welcome back to Let's Revise by Vidyashri Kadlibuddi, where we don't just study, we understand, we connect, and we revise. And today, class 9, we are continuing our journey into a brand new economics chapter, Building Blocks in Economics, the Problem of Choice. Now, before you start thinking, oh no, economics, so many definitions and so many terms, stop right there. Because today I am not going to show you something very interesting. You have already been doing economics every single day. Yes. Even before you open your economics textbook, every time you decide, should I spend my money or save it? Should I study or watch on one more episode? Should I buy this or that? You are already making a choice. And today we are going to discover why choices become necessary in the first place. So let's begin with the very first set of situations from our NCERT chapter. If you had to choose, would you spend your pocket money on snacks or save it for a new pair of shoes? So, okay, imagine I give you 500 rupees. You can either spend it today on your favorite snack or save it because you really want that new pair of shoes. What would you do? Think for a second. Don't worry, I won't ask you to reveal your answer here. But now, ask yourself, why did you choose that option? Whether to have your favorite snack or to buy a new pair of shoes. Maybe you really wanted those shoes, or maybe you were hungry. Maybe you thought saving was smarter. Different students may make different choices, and that's perfectly normal. But there is one thing common to everyone. You cannot use the same 500 rupees to completely satisfy both the choices. If you spend it on snacks, that money isn't available for the shoes. If you save it for the shoes, you may have to give up the snacks for now. And that is our first glimpse of problem of choice. But is this problem only about your pocket money? Absolutely not. Let's make the situation little more interesting. If your school library had only 5 copies of a new book but 20 students wanted to read it, who should get the book first? Imagine your school library gets the most exciting new storybook and suddenly 20 students want to read it, but the librarian has only 5 copies. Now what? 5 students can take the books, but what about the remaining 15? Who should get the book first? Should it be the students who ask first or students who need it for a project? Should everyone get a turn or should the school buy more copies? Now notice something here. Our first example was about money, but this one is about books. But the problem is similar. Many people want something, but the available resource is actually limited, and therefore someone has to make a choice. Can the students share them or should the school buy more copies? So, NCERT gives us another important thought here. There isn't necessarily just one solution. The students could either share the books or the school could buy more copies. But even buying more copies requires resources. The school needs money to buy those books, and that money could have been used for something else. Maybe new sports equipment, or for maybe laboratory materials, or maybe something else the school needs. So, whenever you see a choice, don't just ask, what should we choose? Also ask, what are our alternatives? That little question is going to become very important as we move through this chapter. So now we have looked at your pocket money, we have looked at a school library. Now let's imagine something completely different. A farmer standing in a field. Which type of crop should a farmer grow based on the condition of soil, rainfall, and market demand? So imagine you are the farmer, you have land, but your land has a particular soil. Your area receives a certain amount of rainfall. You also have to think about what people actually want to buy. So you can simply say, I will grow whatever I feel like. You have to think. If the rainfall is low, should you choose a crop that requires a lot of water? If the soil is suitable for one crop but not for another one, which would be the better choice? And even if a crop grows well, what if there is very little demand for it in the market? So the farmer has to bring several things together, like resources that are available to him, conditions of the weather and the market, demand in the market, and then finally he comes down to a decision to grow the required crop. And again, we say the same thing, a choice has to be made. Now let's change the scene again. Imagine you are running a business. Should an enterprise employ more labor or capital in the production process? So, suppose you own a garment factory. You need people to work. You also need machines and equipments. But perhaps you have limited money to invest. So, you have to think, should I employ more workers or should I invest more in machines? Maybe the nature of the product requires skilled workers. Maybe technology can make production faster. Maybe the cost of machines is very high. So the enterprise has to decide how to use its available resource. And once again, do we have alternatives? But we cannot necessarily choose everything that we want. So we have looked at you, your school, a farmer, a businessman. Now let's go to the biggest decision maker of them all, the government. Should the government spend more on building highways or hospitals? Now imagine you are sitting in a government office. You have many important things to take care of. People need health care. They also need roads. There is a need for education too, infrastructure as well, along with which public services are also very much important. But the resources that you have are extremely limited. So if the government decides to give greater priority to hospital, it may have fewer resources available for some other priorities like education and roads. And if it decides to give greater priority to highway, the same question arises again. So again, what should we choose? And suddenly our little 500 decision has become a decision involving an entire country. So class 9, stop for a moment. Look at all the examples we have just seen. You, which relates with the pocket money, school, which relates with the limited books, farmer who decides which crop to grow, enterprise who decides whether should I take labors or invest in machines, and government who has to decide on hospitals or highways. Now, these are all different people who are dealing with different situations and different resources, but they all have one common problem among them. Okay, so what are those common problems? Let's understand that. These are not random questions. Rather, these are examples of economic choices that individuals, enterprises, and the governments have to make. So, this sentence is extremely important. The book tells us that these choices aren't random, they are called as economic choices. And economic choices are made by individuals like you and me, enterprises such as businesses, and governments which make decisions for the society. So, economics isn't something that happens only inside a bank or inside a big company or inside a government office. Economics is present in our everyday decisions. And now we need to ask, why do we have to make so many choices? That takes us to the next part. So let us look at the image that has been given in your textbook. The image, the figure of 8.1 that describes about needs and wants. On the needs side, okay, the textbook shows us things connected with basic requirements such as food, house or shelter, then education or books, then healthcare facilities. But on the wants side, the we see things such as larger or more luxurious house, a smartphone, a watch, a car, and cosmetics. Now this picture is not telling us what that wants are bad. It is helping us to understand an important difference. And that difference is between the needs as well as wants. So let's dig in deeper here. Some of our preferences are needs, such as essentials like food, water, and shelter, while others are wants like gadgets, vacation, or luxury items. So let's make this very simple here. Needs are things essential for our basic life and well being. For example, food, water, shelter, healthcare. These are things which we generally need. Now think about a new smartphone, a luxury watch, a vacation, an expensive car, designer clothes. These are wants. We would like to have them, but they are not necessarily essential for our basic survival. And here is an important point. Want does not mean bad. There is nothing wrong with wanting a phone or a vacation. The problem begins when we have many wants but limited resources to satisfy them. Okay, now again let us look at the figure 8.1 once again. Why do you think the textbook has placed these pictures under two different headings? Because the picture is asking us to think, what do I actually need versus what would I simply like to have? And sometimes the answer can depend on different situations. For example, a mobile phone may be a want for entertainment, but for someone who needs it for online classes or work, it may become much more important. So we should not blindly memorize phone is equal to want. Instead, understand the principle. Needs are essential, wants are things we desire beyond those essentials. Okay. So human wants are unlimited, keep changing. For instance, people may want to upgrade from a bicycle to motorbike and then to a car. Now this is where economics become really interesting. Imagine you finally get your dream bicycle. All of you are really happy. Then after some time you think a motorbike would be better. Later, maybe I should have a car. And after getting a car, you may start thinking about a better model of the car. That's the point the textbook is making here. Human wants keep changing. One want gets satisfied and another want can appear. Think about the technology. A few years ago, having a basic smartphone may have felt amazing, but today you might want a better camera, better storage, better battery, faster performance, and the list continues. So, wants don't simply stop. Okay, now put the two sides together. And here is where the real economic problem appears. On one side, our wants keep increasing and changing, and on other side, our resources are extremely limited. Our money is limited, our time is limited, land is limited, water is limited, labor and capital are also limited resources. So what happens then? We cannot have everything we want at the same time, and therefore we have to choose. And that is the very core of this entire chapter. Okay, so let's move to understand the next part of the lesson where we try to solve a simple activity given in the textbook called as Let's Explore. And in this, you have the first question. The first question is list three things your parents bought this month. Can you classify them into needs or wants? Okay, so I have just created a sample answer for you guys. You can write anything that your parents have bought this month, okay, or whatever comes to your mind. So suppose your family bought groceries. Now this groceries is a need because food is essential for the family and food can be prepared with the help of the groceries that is bought. Second, they helped you buy school textbooks because they are required for your education. And third, They bought a new smart television, and now this is a need or a want? It is a want. It may improve entertainment and convenience, but it isn't essential for your basic survival. So remember, these are only sample answers. Your family's purchases may be completely different, and that's actually the point of the activity. So you have to look at the purpose of the purchase and decide whether it is a need or a want. Okay, moving ahead with the second question. The second question is, do you think having too many wants may create problem? Why or why not? Okay, so here is a possible answer that I would like to give you. For me, yes, having too many wants can definitely create problems because our resources are limited. For example, suppose you want a new phone, a new pair of shoes, a gaming console, a vacation, and a bicycle, but your family has a limited income. It may not be possible for them to buy you everything. So you have to prioritize, and if you keep trying to satisfy every want, it could lead to unnecessary spending and even financial pressure also. But remember, having wants is completely normal. The important thing is learning how to prioritize them according to the resources available. And that is exactly where economics begins to become useful in the real life. So let's connect everything we have learned today. You had 500 rupees, you had to choose. Your school had 5 books for 20 students, it had to make a choice. The farmer had to decide which crop to grow. The enterprise had to decide how to use labor and capital. The government had to decide how to use public resources. And all of these decisions come back to one basic reality, that is, resources are limited, and at the same time, human wants keep growing and changing. So, limited resources plus many wants always needs to always leads to a choice that we have to make, and whenever we choose, we may have to give up another alternative. So class 9, we have reached a very important point of the video today. Today we understood why choices become necessary, but our story doesn't end here, because I have a question for you. When you choose one option, what happens to the option that you did not choose? So let's go back to our 500. Suppose you decided, I'm buying the shoes. But what did you give up? The snacks, the movie, the savings, or something else? And what about a farmer? If the farmer chooses to produce more of one crop, and what happens to the other crop? And if a government chooses to spend more resources on one priority, then what happens to the alternatives? This is where economics gets even more interesting. Because the next question is not simply what did I choose, it is what did I give up. And that takes us to our next important concept, choices and limited resources. In the next video, we are going to go one step deeper into this problem, where we will understand scarcity, alternative use of resources, trade-offs, and why limited resources force us to make choices. So don't stop here. Watch the next video in this chapter playlist, because that's where our choices start becoming economics. If this explanation helped you understand the chapter instead of simply memorizing it, make sure to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to my channel. And until the next video, keep learning, keep revising, and keep succeeding. I'm Vidyashri, and you're watching Let's Revise. Bye, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Let's Revise by Vidyashri, where we learn, succeed, and revise together. Class 9, in our last video, we discovered something very important. We have many wants, but we cannot have everything. And that creates a problem, the problem of choice. But today, I'm going to make that problem a little more interesting. Imagine I give you 1000 rupees. Sounds great, right? Now I give you 4 options. You can either go out for your favorite food, or save it for a new shoes, or put it towards a new gadget, or simply save it. Now, can you choose all 4? Think about it. Of course not, right? But here is the interesting part. Why can't you choose everything? Is it because the things you want don't exist? Or is it because you don't like them? Or is it because your money is limited? And that's one simple idea is going to take us into today's topic, choices and limited resources. So keep your thinking caps on, because by the end of this lesson, I want you to be able to look at something as simple as a piece of steel or a farmer's field and see an economics problem hiding inside it. So let's begin. Resources are required to satisfy human needs and wants. So let's make this very simple. We have needs, we have also wants. But can we satisfy them without using anything? No, we need resources. If you want food, you need resources to produce or purchase food. If you want a house, you need resources such as land, materials, labor, and money. If you want a school bag, resources are required to produce it. So, resources are basically the means we use to satisfy our needs and want. And this takes us directly to something you have already studied in your grade 8. In grade 8, you have learned about factors of production like land, labor, capital, and technology, which are used for the production of goods and services. So, do you remember these? Land, which is a natural resource used in production, labor, the physical or mental effort of people, capital, human made resources used for production, such as machines and equipment, technology, the methods and knowledge that help us produce goods and services. So, let's take a simple example. Imagine a bakery. Okay, you need land and natural resource here. You also need labor to prepare the products. You need technology and equipments. You need improved technology for improved production also. Together, these resources help the bakery produce goods. So far, so good. But now comes the real economics problem. However, both natural and human made resources are limited in quantity. So, this is the main problem that we are going to discuss now. So, this is the sentence I want you to remember. Resources are limited. Think about land. Can we create unlimited land whenever we want? No. Am I right? Water is limited, money is limited, machines are limited. Even something as simple as your time is also limited. In a day, you just have 24 hours. You cannot suddenly say, today I need 40 hours, right? So, resources have limits. And when resources are limited, we have a problem because our wants haven't suddenly become limited. We still want more, like ye dil mange more. So, I have a quick question for you. Which of these is a scarce resource? Time, money, land, or all of the above? If you said the answer all of the above, excellent. Now we are ready for the next idea, because if resources are limited, then what can we do with them? They can be put to many alternative uses, such as allocating money to buy fruit or a pair of shoes. So this is very important phrase, alternative uses. Okay, so I want you to remember this next phrase called as the alternative uses. It simply means that same resource can be used for different purposes. So let's take your 1,000 rupees again. You can use it to buy a fruit, shoes, books, or save it. Then the same 1,000 rupees, but it has different possible uses, right? Here is another example. You have one free hour. You can use it to study, play, or play a game, or watch a video, or sleep. Your 1 hour has several alternative uses, but you can choose how to use it. But you cannot use the same hour for everything at the same time. And now we are getting closer to the heart of economics. Let's look into the figure 8.2 that has been given. Okay, so these images that you see right now in the video are the figure 8.2 that focuses on the concept called as alternative uses. Okay, now looking at this picture, as I told you, the picture focuses on the concept called as alternative uses, and in this picture we are going to study the alternative uses of steel. Okay, so firstly, when we go with the first image, you can see medical equipment. So steel can be used to manufacture medical instruments and equipments. Second image, when we see it is used for aircraft manufacturing and used in industrial purposes also. And third image is shown where a steel is used for refrigerator making also. And steel can be used to make refrigerators and other products. Now here is the economic question that I want you all to think. What is common in all these three images? The one common thing among all these three images is the metal of steel. The same resources can be directed towards different purposes. But imagine that the available steel is limited. If more steel is used for one purpose, there may be less available for another purpose, and therefore a choice has to be made. That is exactly what the image is trying to show us. Steel doesn't have only one use, it has alternative uses, and that's why deciding where to use it becomes extremely important. Okay, so that's your figure 8.2 that has been given to you all. Okay, moving ahead, not just households, economies also have to use their scarce resources in the best possible way to meet unlimited wants and improve people's quality of life. So now NCERT is making the problem much bigger. It's not just you deciding what you want to do with your 1,000 rupees. Families make choices, businesses make choices, government make choices, and entire economies have to decide how their limited resources should be used. Imagine a government has limited funds. It may spend it on hospital, school, road, transport, or even water, and many other things. All of these are actually important, but the main problem is the resources are limited. So the government has to think, where can these resources be used most effectively to improve people's life? And that's economic decision making. Okay, so for example, picture 8.2, pictures in figure 8.2 show the alternative uses of steel. So as we have already seen the explanation of figure 8.2, now the image we discussed makes complete sense, right? NCRT isn't showing us random photographs, get this very clear. It is giving us visual example of scarcity and alternative uses. Steel can be used for medical equipment, manufacturing, and refrigerators, and many other purposes as well. So when steel is limited, society has to think about how best to allocate it, and whenever one option is selected, something important always happens. And what is that important thing that happens is, let's understand that. So when one alternative is chosen, the other options are given up. This is the moment where I want you to connect everything. Suppose you have 1,000 rupees, you choose the shoes. What happened to the snacks? Did you give it upon? Suppose the steel is used for refrigerators. What happens to the possibility of using that same quantity of steel somewhere else? That alternative may have to be given up. So every choice has a sacrifice attached to it. And now comes one of the most important terms in economics. The value of what is given up is known as the opportunity cost. So remember this, opportunity cost. This is a very important term that you have to remember. The value of best alternative, which we have given up when we make a choice, is called as opportunity cost. So I'll give you a simple example to understand this. Let's go back to your 1,000 rupees. Suppose you chose to buy shoes. The opportunity cost is not necessarily everything you could have done with 1,000 rupees. We look at the best alternative you gave up. If your next option was going out for a meal with your friends, then that is the opportunity cost of choosing the shoes. So, whenever you hear opportunity cost, ask yourself, what is the next best thing I gave up? That question will save you from many economics mistake. So, in simple words, opportunity cost means whenever we have two options to choose from, and among them we choose one and the other one we give up, that giving up is basically called as opportunity cost, because we gave up that second option to fulfill our first option here. And now the textbook gives us a beautiful example to understand this properly, because sometimes economic becomes much easier when we stop talking about money and start talking about a farmer's fields. So let's understand this through an example. Imagine that a farmer has a piece of land and can choose to grow either barley or wheat on it. Okay, so NCRT is basically saying, okay, enough of theory. Let's see this in real life. And our real life situation is a farmer here. Imagine you are this farmer. You have one piece of land and you can grow either barley or you can grow wheat. Now, can you use the exact same piece of land to produce the maximum possible amount of both the crops simultaneously? No, right? So you have to decide how much land and other resources to devote to each, and that means trade off. Okay, for one crop you may mean less for the other crop. So let's move in. With limited land, water, and labor, the farmer must decide how much of each crop to produce. Okay, so look at these resources mentioned. The resources are land, water, and labor, and all these three resources are limited in the environment. So the farmer has to divide these resources between barley and wheat. And now I have a question for you. If the farmer wants to produce more barley, what do you think will happen to wheat? Think. Don't look at the answer yet. The farmer will generally will have to sacrifice wheat production, and the NCERT gives us numbers to make this trade off visible. So let's consider the following table, which is given in the textbook, that shows various combinations of quantities of barley and wheat that can be grown by the farmer. Okay, so let's understand this entire table that has been given. So the table has three columns. The first one is combination, second one is barley's in kg, and third one is wheat in kg. Okay, so let's not just stare at this table, let's understand this table. Okay, so talking about point A here, if the farmer produces 0 kg of barley, then he would be able to produce 100 kgs of wheat. So all the relevant resources what are there, he will put it into wheat production. Let's go to point number B. In point number B, if he grows 25 kg of barley, then 90 kg of wheat. So what has happened? The production of wheat has fallen down from 100 kg to 90 kg, and the farmer actually produced 25 kg of barley but sacrificed what quantity of wheat? 10 kg of wheat. That sacrifice here is called as the opportunity cost in action. Okay, so what is that? To produce 25 kg of barley, how much quantity of wheat production did the farmer sacrifice? He sacrificed 10 kg of wheat production here, and that sacrifice is called as what? Opportunity cost here. Moving ahead to point number C. Barley becomes 50 kg and wheat becomes 70 kg. So compared with point A, what do we see is barley production has increased by 50 kg while wheat production has decreased by how many kgs? By 30 kg here. Again, more barley means less of wheat. When we go ahead with point number D, we see that barley's quantity is 75 kg whereas wheat quantity is 40 kg. And finally, when we come to point E, barley has become how much? 100 kg and wheat has become how much? 0 kg. So the farmer has moved completely towards barley. But look at what happened to wheat. From 100 kgs, the wheat has come down to 0 kgs. The more resources are directed towards barley, the less is available for wheat. And that is the trade-off the chapter wants you to understand. Okay, so now let us look at figure 8.3 that has been given to us. Now this figure 8.3 is called as PPC graph. Okay, now whatever table we studied right now, that table has been given in the form of a picture for us, and this is the graph which is called as production possibility curve, which is also abbreviated as PPC curve. So don't panic when you see the graph. Let's decode it step by step. Okay, so when we talk about the x-axis, the horizontal axis here, this is called as the x-axis here. This represents the production of barley in kgs. And as we move towards the right, as we move along the line of x-axis, we see that the barley production goes on increasing. Now let us look at y-axis. The vertical line is called as the y-axis here, and this represents the production of wheat in kgs. And as we move upwards, we see that wheat production goes on decreasing. So now look at the curve. Now this is the curve that we are talking about from A, B, C, D and E. Okay, so what happens as we move from A to E? Barley production increases, but wheat production goes on decreasing. That's why the curve is not going up, instead it is going down, it is sloping down. So if the examiner is asking you why is the PPC downward sloping, your answer should be because with the limited resources, producing more of one good requires sacrifice some amount of the other good over here. So that is about the possible production possibility curve. Now let me test you here. Suppose a farmer is at point C, okay, where barley production is 50 kg and wheat production is 70 kg. So barley production is how much? 50 kg and wheat production is how much? 70 kg. Now the farmer moves to point D. From point C, the farmer is moving to point D. Now here the barley production has gone to 75 kg and wheat production has gone to 40 kg. What happened here? It shows that barley production increased by how much? Here it was 50 kg. It increased by how much? 25 kgs here. But wheat production, what happened to it? It was here 70 kgs. And from 70 kg, it came down to 40 kg, which shows a decrease in 30 kgs here. So what did the farmer sacrifice to produce more barley? He sacrificed 30 kg of wheat production. And this is the trade-off shown in the PPC. And the sacrificed alternative represents the opportunity cost. So I hope the table and figure 8.3 is clarified to you. If not, then please put me down in the comment section. I'll definitely post whatever doubt you have. I'll be definitely answering to those doubts. Okay, so this is called the production possibility curve, also known as PPC, which shows the trade-off between barley and wheat produced. So now we can define what is PPC in simple words. PPC shows the different maximum combination of two goods that can be produced with available resources and technology. In the example given, barley and wheat, the curve lets us visually see the trade-off. More barley means less of wheat, and more wheat means less of barley. So the PPC is basically telling us you have limited resources, so choose your combinations carefully. Okay. So as the farmer moves from point A to E, they produce more barley and lesser wheat. So now look at the graph that we have already discussed. At point A, barley is how much? 0. But wheat is how much? 100 kg. But at point E, there's a complete reversal. Barley is how much? 100 kg. But wheat is how much? 0 kg. So from moving A to E means barley production increased, but wheat production actually decreased. This is why I want you to stop thinking of the PPC just as a graph you have to reproduce in an exam. It is actually telling a story about a farmer making choices with limited resources. Moving ahead. However, to grow more barley, some wheat must be sacrificed. This is the opportunity cost of growing barley. So this is most important connection in the graph. Suppose the farmer says, I want more barley. Fine, but economic is asking what will you give up then? If producing more barley means producing less wheat, then the wheat sacrificed is the opportunity cost associated with the increasing barley production. So remember, choice means trade-off, trade-off means sacrifice, and sacrifice means opportunity cost, and that's the chain. So remember the chain: choice, trade-off, then sacrifice, and then you have the opportunity cost, which is the chain, how opportunity cost is actually determined. All the points on the PPC show the maximum output that can be produced through the efficient use of resources by avoiding the wastage. So now we are introducing another important idea called as efficiency or efficient. The points on PPC represent maximum possible production combination given the resources and conditions in the example. That means resources are being used efficiently rather than being wasted. Imagine a bakery has enough workers, ovens and ingredients to produce 1,000 loaves of bread. But because of poor planning, it produces only 700. resources may not be being used as efficiently as possible. So the PPC helps us think about what can be produced when resources are used efficiently and effectively. This helps in better planning and decision making by enterprises and the government. And now we understand why this isn't just a farmer's problem. The same logic is applied to businesses to decide how to use their resources. It is also applicable to the government to think about how scarce resources can be used among competing priorities. For example, should more resources go towards healthcare or education or infrastructure or defense? They are called as trade offs. The PPC is one economic tool that helps us understand such choices. So let's pause here. I want you to answer this without looking at your notes. If resources were unlimited, would we have the same problem of choice? Probably not in the same way, because if we could have unlimited resources, we wouldn't face the same scarcity based trade-offs. But in real world, resources are actually limited, and that's why the choices actually matters. Okay, so moving ahead to understand the few important basic questions given under the activity called as Let's Explore, and you have two questions to answer here. The first question is, ask your parents about how they make choices for everyday purchase. What is the opportunity cost of making a particular decision? Okay, so I'm just giving you a sample answer like I've always told you. So let's take an example. Suppose your parents have 2000 rupees to spend on a particular household purchase. They are deciding between buying a new kitchen appliance or buying new clothes for the family. Suppose they choose the kitchen appliance. What is the opportunity cost? It is the value of the best alternative that they have given up. In this case, if they choose to buy clothes, then they have to give up on the kitchen appliance. Suppose your family, I'm giving you another example here. Suppose your family has rupees 500 for a weekend outing and you choose to go for a movie. The opportunity cost could be the restaurant meal or family could have been chosen instead. So when you ask your parents this question, don't simply ask, what did you buy? Ask, what was your next best alternative? That's where the economic actually begins. The second question is, how do you decide to spend your time? It's time scarce resource. Now, the answer to this question is absolutely time is a limited resource because each of us has a limited amount of time on daily basis. We just have 24 hours in a day. Now, imagine your evening. You have 2 hours. You need to study or to play or use your phone or spend this time with your family and eventually even sleep too. You cannot give the same 2 hours completely to all these activities. So you have to make choices. Suppose you spend 2 hours watching movie instead of buying, instead of studying, the opportunity cost is the best alternative use of those 2 hours that you gave up. Perhaps studying for an upcoming test. And that's why time is an excellent example of limited resources. So, class 9. Today, we started with something as simple as what should I do with my money? And we ended up understanding scarcity, alternative uses, choices, trade offs, opportunity cost, and even the production possibility curve. And that's what makes economics so interesting. It takes an ordinary decision and helps us understand the thinking behind it. But now we have answered an important question. Why do we have to make choices? Because yes, resources are limited, but our journey isn't over yet because now I want you to think about something much bigger. If individuals, businesses, and governments are constantly making choices, what exactly does economics study then? What does economics actually deal with? What are economists trying to understand? And how do consumers, producers, and governments fit into this whole picture? That's exactly where we are going in our next video. So don't miss the next topic called as what does economics deal with? Come back for the next video because we are going to take everything we have learned today and zoom out from one farmer's field to the entire economy. If today's lesson helped you understand economics rather than simply memorizing it, then like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. Until then, keep questioning, keep thinking, and keep revising because The main motto of my channel is to learn, revise, and succeed. I am Vidyashri, and this is Let's Revise. Bye, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Let's Revise by Vidyashri Kadlibuddi. Now, class 9, let me ask you something. When you hear the words economics, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Money, bank, business, price, or maybe even, oh no, another difficult subject. But here is the surprise. Economics is not just about money, like I've always told you. Remember our last video? You had limited money, a farmer had limited land, water, and labor, and a government had limited resources. They all had to make choices. So today, we are going to make one giant step forward and ask, what does economics deal with? And by the end of this video, I want you to look around your own life and realize, wait, economics is happening everywhere? So let's begin. The word economics comes from the Greek word called as oikonomia, which in turn is composed of two words called as oikos, which is usually translated as household, and nemian, which is best translated as management. Okay, don't get frightened by the Greek word that has been given here. Let's break them down. Okay, so the word economics actually comes from the Greek word, and the pronunciation of this word goes as oikonomia, sorry, oikonomia, which in turn is composed of two words. The first word is oikos, which usually means household, and the second word is called as nemein, which means management. So putting them together, oikonomia or economics is nothing but management of the household. Now think about your own home. Someone has to decide how much money should we spend on food, how much should we save, what school expenses need to be paid, should we buy something now or wait. These decisions are about managing limited resources. So the original idea behind economics was closely connected to something very familiar, that is managing a household. But today, economics has become much broader because we are not only managing individual households, we are also talking about businesses, governments, and the entire economies. And that's exactly where the next sentence takes us. So, economics refers to household management. In the case of limited resources and unlimited wants, not just families but also nations must plan how to use their resources efficiently. So, in original sense, as we have discussed, economics refers to managing the resources of a household. Imagine a family has 50,000 available every month. They have to plan that 50,000 rupees for food, education, medicines, household expenses, and even do savings along with which they have to satisfy their many other needs. They can't spend the entire 50,000 on only one thing. They have to manage it. That managing is called as the household management. But now let's make the problem bigger. This is where economics moves us from the household to the whole country. A family has limited resources, but does a country have unlimited resources? No. A country also has limited resources like land, water, workers, money, technology, natural resources, and all. The government has to decide how these resources can be used. For example, a country may need hospitals, schools, roads, transport, water facilities, but resources are actually limited. So the country has to plan carefully. The bigger the economy, the bigger the choices. And that brings us to an important economics word called as efficiently. It means using available resources in a way that avoids unnecessary wastage and helps achieve the desired goals. So, families make choices, like nations also make choices. But who else makes economic choices? Let's find it out. Since resources have competing uses, individuals, enterprises, and governments must decide how to best allocate them, as these decisions affect the well being of people and society as a whole. So, the key phrase here is to understand is competing uses. Remember our steel example from the previous video of previous topic? The same steel was used for medical equipment. It could be used for manufacturing aircraft or for even making refrigerators. So different users are competing for the same limited resources, and therefore someone has to decide where should the resource be used. And this happens at three levels: individuals and families. Okay, how should they spend their money? Enterprises, how should businesses use their workers, machines, money, and other resources? And governments, how should public resources be allocated among different priorities? And these decisions matter because they affect people's life. For example, if a government uses more resources to healthcare, that can affect access to hospitals and medical services. So, economic choices aren't just numbers on paper, they affect the people's well being as well. Okay, so moving further, the discipline of economics deals with how choices are made by optimizing the use of limited resources to satisfy the needs and wants. So, class 9, this is one of the most important sentences of this section. If you get a question, what does actually economics deal with? This sentence gives you the heart of the answer. Economics studies how choices are made by or with the help of the limited resources to satisfy the needs and wants. So optimizing, don't confuse this with simply choosing the cheapest option. Optimizing means trying to make the best possible use of a limited resource according to the situation and objective. For example, coming back to your 1,000 rupee story again, now, out of the 1,000 rupees I'm going to give you, you want books, snacks, or a new t shirt. You can't necessarily buy everything out of it. So, you think, what combination of choices will make the best use of my 1,000 rupees? That's called as economic thinking. Okay. Moving further, it explains how different economic entities, consumers, producers, and governments and financial institutions interact in an economy. So now economics become even more interesting. It doesn't study about only one person. It studies about economic entities, okay, or different stakeholders of economics and how they interact. So let's understand them. The first one is consumers, people who buy and use goods and services. For example, when you go and buy a pen, you're going to use this pen for writing notes. So you are a consumer here. Second one is producer, people or businesses that produce goods and services. For example, a bakery producing cake. The next one is government. They make policies, collect tax, and provide public services. And the next one is financial institutions. They are involved in financial activities such as saving, lending, and investment. Now, notice something. These groups don't operate separately, they all are connected. A consumer buys from producer, a producer needs workers and resources, the government makes policies, financial institutions provide financial services. So, economic studies or the connections present between all these four entities of the economics. Okay, so let's understand this with an example. For example, how people work and earn wages, how wealth and resources are distributed, how prices are determined in the market, how education and technology drive investment, and how government policies and trade influence prices in the market, employment, and so on. So now we have a big list of things economics can help us understand. So let's take them one by one. The first one that we are going to understand is how people work and earn wages. Why does someone receive a particular salary? What affects employment? Economics studies such questions. Then, how wealth and resources are distributed. So, who has access to resources? How are income and wealth distributed? And again, economics studies these issues. Then, how prices are determined in the market. So, why does the price of tomato sometimes rise and sometimes decrease? Why does the price of a phone differ from one model to another? And why can prices change when demand or supply changes? These are the questions that we study in economics. Moving further, how education and technology drive investment. So, how can education and technology influence investment and economic activity? This is economic studies with these relationships. And then we have government policies and trade, which influence prices in the market. So, government's decision and trade can influence the price of a product in the market and employment. So, economics is actually asking questions about things we encounter on daily basis. So think about this. You go to a shop and find that the price of your favorite snack has increased. You might simply say, why has it become so expensive? But an economist will ask, what factors may have caused the price to change? That is the difference. So, economics teaches us to look beyond what happened to ask why did it happen. And to answer such questions properly, we need something very important. And what's that? However, good decisions rely on data and analysis, not on the guesswork. So, this is a beautiful line. Imagine your parents want to buy a refrigerator. Would they simply walk into a shop and say, this one looks nice, let's buy it? Maybe sometimes, but sensibly, decision could involve checking price, features, electricity consumption, reviews, size, warranty, and comparing alternatives. That is called as data, which is analyzed. Similarly, businesses and governments cannot make every major economic decision based simply on guesses. So good economic decisions requires information, evidences and analysis. And now in the textbook we are going to study three examples. So let's decipher these examples one by one. For example, families allocate their money for essential items such as food, medicine, and school supplies, and non essential items such as jewelry, entertainment, and restaurant meals and saving. So let's imagine a family receiving its monthly income of 50,000. They have to divide that money among different purposes between their wants and needs. So, what are their needs? Food, medicine, and school. And what are their wants? Jewelry, entertainment, restaurant meals. And savings also comes among need. Money kept aside for future needs. The family has to balance all of these because what is their income? 50,000, and this income is actually limited. So families make an economic choice about how to allocate their money. Okay. Second example, government use revenue from taxation to plan expenditure on infrastructure and welfare programs. So now move from family to the government. Where does the government get so much of where does the government get some of its revenue? It comes from the tax. The government can then use its revenue for things such as infrastructure, public services, and welfare programs. But again, the resources or the tax that they have collected, though it might be in crores and lakhs, but that resource is again limited. So the government has to plan where should the available money be spent. And that takes us right back to our original problem, choices under limited resources. Moving ahead with the next example, enterprises study market trends and new innovations to better serve customers and maximize their profits. Now imagine you are running a company. Would you simply produce something without knowing whether people want it? Probably not. You have to do the business study. You have to understand what does the customer want? Are there competitors and what are they doing? What is changing in the market? What new technology is available? What new products can be developed and why? Because businesses want to serve customers better and make efficient decisions that can help them maximize their profits. For example, imagine people suddenly prefer wireless headphones over wired ones. A company producing electronics may study that trend and change its production. That's economic decision to survive in the market. Economics study the available alternatives, associated opportunity cost, and potential outcomes to help the individuals, enterprises, and institutions to make decisions. So now we have come to a full circle. Remember our previous topic, opportunity cost. So economists don't simply ask, what can we choose? They also ask, what are the alternatives? What will we give up? What could happen after making this choice? Suppose a business has 10 lakh rupees. It could buy new machines or open another branch. The economist would examine the alternatives. Think what is the opportunity cost. Also think about what are the possible outcomes and then ask about what are the risks involved. So which choice could be more beneficial? So economics is not about guessing, it is about comparing alternatives and analyzing consequences. They use data from government reports such as economic surveys and financial statements of companies, and their analysis helps to understand the potential risk and opportunities. So now NCERT introduces an important source of information which is called as the economic surveys. So economists need reliable information. They need data. For example, how is the economy performing? Which sectors are growing? What is happening with employment? What challenges are existing? What opportunities may emerge? Government reports and company financial statements can provide information that economists generally analyze. And this analysis can help identify risk, which are what problems might arise, and opportunities, which are what possibilities of for growth and improvement may exist. And this brings us to the special box in your textbook where we study the scope of their work. The work is of the economist over here, and that is a figure 8.4 which has been given in the textbook. Now, this figure is a focus on scope of work of economist. Now look at this figure carefully, which says scope of work of economist. This image is showing us that economists can work in different areas. And let's understand these areas or the four boxes which are given one by one. Starting with the first one called as policy making. The figure says guiding governments on taxation or welfare spending. So economists can help government analyze economic information and think about policies like should a government change a tax? How much should be spent on welfare programs? What could be the possible effect? Economists can provide analysis that helps policymakers make informed decisions. Okay. Second one is business consulting. They can help firms plan growth and improve efficiency. So economists can also work with private businesses and enterprises. Suppose a company wants to expand. It may need to study market condition, cost, consumer behavior, competition, possible risk. An economist can analyze such information and help the firm make better decisions. The third one is research and education, studying economic trends and teaching others. This is another major area. Economists can conduct research. They can study economic trends and analyze data. And of course, they can also teach economics. So, if you are wondering, can economics become a career? Absolutely. There are many areas in which economic knowledge can be used. And the fourth scope is finance. Here, you get to know that advising investors on where to invest. Economists can also work in finance, financial decisions involving analyzing information, understanding risk and possible returns. For example, investors may need information to decide where and how to invest. So again, economics helps people to make more informed decisions. So what is figure 8.4 really telling us? Don't just memorize the four boxes. The picture is making one bigger point here. That is, economics has a wide scope. An economist isn't someone who only sits with a calculator and talks about money. He can be a policymaker, a business advisor, a researcher and an educationist, and a financial advisor too. And these areas all involve something we have been discussing throughout this chapter. So, making better choices using limited resources as well as information. Okay, so that's about your scope of economics and economist. So think if you're trying for a career other than being an engineer or a doctor. Moving further, we are going to now understand one important aspect, the data collected by the economist to analyze. And now we are going to study about the economic survey. Okay, so economic survey, a report on Indian economy. Now let's look at another very useful part of this chapter. So, what's exactly an economic survey? Is what we are going to understand here. And this economic survey is on the concept called as a report on the Indian economy. So, let's understand this entire concept in simple terms. Starting with the Economic Survey of India is an important annual document prepared by Ministry of Finance and presented in Parliament before the Union Budget. So let's simplify this. The Economic Survey is an important report on what? On the Indian economy. And who prepares it? It is prepared by the Ministry of Finance, and it is presented in the parliament session of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha before the union budget. So think of it as an important annual report that helps us understand how has the Indian economy been performing. Okay. It reviews the country's economic performance during the past years and analyzes various sectors of the economy, such as agriculture, industry, services, and other areas like employment, inflation, education, health, infrastructure, etc. So, this is where the economic survey becomes really useful. It looks at what happened during the previous year. For example, it analyzes areas like agriculture, industry, services, employment, inflation, education, health, infrastructure. So it gives us a broad picture of the economy, like what is happening across different parts of India's economy here. It discusses the future challenges and opportunities for the economy. So, the economic survey doesn't only look backwards and provide us data, it can also discuss what challenges India might have faced and what opportunities could India use for the future growth. For example, an economy may face challenges related to employment or inflation, while also having opportunities rising from technology, investment, and expanding sectors. So, economic analysis helps us think about the future as well. Okay, so this helps people understand how the Indian economy is performing and what steps the government may take to improve the growth and development. So, the information in the economic survey can help people understand where the Indian economy stands and what challenges and possibilities do exist. It can also provide us with useful information for thinking about government policies and economic planning for a better future growth in our country. Moving further, let's understand what is the furthermore benefit of an economic survey. It also acts as a blueprint for the upcoming union budget by providing crucial insights for policymakers while making policy related decisions. Now, don't interpret blueprint as a meaning of the economic survey. Literally decides the entire budget. Think of it as an important source of information and analysis that helps policymakers while preparing and considering economic decisions. The survey provides insights, that is, informations. The union budget then sets out the government's in financial proposals. So the economic survey helps create an informed background for policy and new policies to be made or any amendments in the policies to be made in our country. It is also useful for citizens as it explains economic data in a clear manner. So, and this is actually very much important for you too. Why should students and ordinary citizens care about economic data? Because economic decisions affect everyday life, like prices of commodities, employment opportunities, education cost, healthcare facilities, infrastructure, and even savings too. So, understanding economic information helps citizens understand what is happening around them. So, a well informed citizen can understand economic decisions in a better way. So you have been given a website link here to understand the latest economic survey. You can go through that website and try to figure out what an economic survey is and how it basically helps us or helps the country on a larger extent. Okay. So, class 9, if someone asks you tomorrow, what is economics? Don't simply say it's about money. That's too far too small. Instead, remember, economics is what? It's about choices. Choices made by people, businessmen, governments, and other economic institutions. When they have limited resources, many needs and wants to satisfy. And now you know something even more interesting. Economists don't just make guesses, they study data, they compare alternatives, they think about opportunity cost, analyze the risk and opportunities, and they help people and institutions make better informed decisions. That's why economics is not just a subject you study for an exam, it is a way of understanding the world around you. So, if today's lesson made you say economics a little bit differently, then like this video, subscribe to Let's Revise by Vidyashri Kadlibuddi, and share it with your class 9 friends. And don't stop here, because we have now understood what economics deals with, but our chapter still has another important question waiting for us, and that is we are going to understand the topic called as key questions in economics. So join me in the next video as we explore the concept key questions in economics. Until then, keep questioning, keep connecting, and keep revising. I am Vidyashri, and this is Let's Revise by Everyone. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Let's Revise by Vidyashri, where we learn together, revise together, and succeed together. Let me give you a situation. Imagine you are the captain of a school canteen. You have limited money, limited ingredients, and limited workers, and thousands of students with different taste. Now you have to make three different decisions. What should I make? Sandwiches, idlis, pizzas, or fruit bowls? How should I make them? More workers, more machines, better technology, and finally, who am I making them for? Primary students, senior students, teachers, or for everyone? Sounds like a canteen problem, right? But guess what? You have just stepped into one of the biggest questions in economics. Because whenever we have unlimited wants plus limited resources, we are forced to make choices. And economics tells us that these choices lead to three fundamental questions. So today we are going to crack one of the most important topics of economics called as the key questions in economics, which includes what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. And by the end of this video, I want you to be able to look at any product around you and ask these three questions. So let's begin. Any mismatch between unlimited wants and limited resources gives rise to three key questions that the discipline of economics seeks to address. So let's connect this with everything we have learned so far. People have many wants, but resources are actually limited. So we cannot produce everything in limited quantities, and therefore an economy has to make decisions. But the question is, which decisions? Economics identifies three fundamental questions, and figure 8.5 is going to show them to us now. So let's decipher figure 8.5 that has been given to us in the textbook. Okay, so look at this diagram carefully. At the top, we have two sections, unlimited wants but limited resources. This leads to what? It leads to scarcity, and scarcity forces us to make choices, and those choices leads us to three questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. So class, remember this flow: unlimited wants plus limited resources leads to scarcity. Scarcity leads to choices, and that leads us to these three important questions. And this is the very logic behind figure 8.5. So now let's understand each question properly. So moving ahead with the next topics of the lesson, where we answer the first key question and the second one, which includes what to produce and for whom. Okay, so let's start this with the first question. An economy cannot produce limited quantities of everything, so it has to decide which goods and services should be produced and in what quantity. Imagine a farmer has limited land and water. Should the farmer grow wheat, paddy, and millets, or pulses? There are different possibilities, but limited resources means choices have to be made, and that's exactly what the next sentence explains. This fundamental question concerns which goods and services and in what quantities should be produced to meet the needs of the economy over a given period. So the sentence has two parts: what goods and services, okay, and what quantities. For example, food, clothes, car, healthcare, education, transport, and secondly, how much of it in quantity. Imagine a city has limited resources. Should it produce more buses, more hospitals, more schools, or more houses? The economy has to think about people's needs and available resources. So, what to produce is not simply asking what people like, it is asking what should be produced and in what actual quantity. For instance, should farmers produce water intensive crops such as sugarcane, paddy, or drought resistant crops such as millets and pulses? So now NCRT gives us a fantastic real life example. Imagine a farmer has limited water. The farmer can either grow sugarcane or rice, which requires a lot of water, or he can choose to grow millets and pulses, which are drought resistant crops and require less amount of water. So the question isn't simply which crop is better. The real economic question here is, with the given available resource of water and condition, which crop should be produced? And now things become even more interesting because both choices can have benefits. Okay, so let's understand how. Producing sugarcane yields high profits and supports industries such as sugar, whereas producing millets and pulses saves water, improves soil health, and promotes sustainable agriculture. See, like we said, both of them has benefits here. So let's look at the examples. If the farmer decides to produce sugarcane, then it is beneficial in many ways. Like it can provide high profits and it can support sugar related industries. But what is the problem associated with it? It is a water intensive crop. But if the farmer chooses to grow millets and pulses, then what are the benefits associated with it? It saves water, it improves the health of the soil, and supports a sustainable agriculture. So the farmer or the economy has competing benefits. There isn't always one magical answer that works in every situation. The decision depends on circumstances, and this is where our previous concept returns, the concept of opportunity cost, where you sacrifice one choice over the other choice. Okay, moving ahead. Here, the opportunity cost of producing sugarcane is foregone gains from saved water and improved soil health, which means, remember the rule of opportunity cost. When you choose one option, what valuable alternative did you give up? So, if the farmer chooses sugarcane, the farmer gives up the potential benefits associated with saving water and improving the soil health through alternative crop choice. Which means, if the farmer chose to grow sugarcane, he would have to miss the benefits if he by growing millets and other pulses, right? So those foregone benefits represent the opportunity cost described here. So class, notice something important here. Opportunity cost is not always money. It can sometimes involve materials like water, time, environmental benefits, health, and other valuable alternatives. That's a very important understanding. Okay. This type of decision reflects the trade off between short term economic gains and long term sustainability by accounting for the opportunity cost of various alternatives. So, now we are looking at a short term versus the long term benefits. Sugarcane may provide an attractive economic return, but the alternative may offer benefits such as water conservation and soil health. So, the decision maker has to think, what do I gain today? And what might I give up for the future? That's a trade off. And this idea isn't limited to the farmers, it is associated with each and every one of us over here. So similar trade-offs have to be made by companies, government, as well as consumers. So as I told you, this type of decision and idea isn't just limited to the farmer, it is associated with a company, a government, and even a consumer also. How with a company? A company may choose between investing in a new machine or expanding its workforce. A government may have to decide how to allocate limited public funds among healthcare, infrastructure, and other priorities. Whereas a consumer may have to choose between buying a new phone and saving the money. Different situations, but the same economic problem, limited resources, choices, which leads to trade offs. Moving ahead, now, as we have answered, what should we produce? But imagine you have produced something. Now comes another question. Who is it actually for? And this is where the textbook gives us a very relatable example. The question for whom to produce delves into the purpose of goods and services produced, how they are produced and distributed, and who benefits from their production. So, this question is basically asking who will use or benefit from what is produced. Okay, a producer doesn't simply make something or hope that someone buys it. They think about who are the consumers, what do they need, what can they afford, how should the product be designed, how should it be distributed, or for whom to produce. Is about understanding the people or groups that the goods and services are intended to serve. And now NCERT gives us a wonderful example here. So let's look into this example. Since resources are limited and people have different needs, income levels, taste, and lifestyle, producers decide which group of consumers they want to serve. So let's take something you use on daily basis, like for example shoes. Do all people want exactly the same shoes? No. A school student may need a durable school shoes. An office worker may need formal shoes. An athlete may need sports shoes. Someone at home may simply want comfortable slippers. So producers who have to think, who are we producing this for? And that's the heart of the question. For example, shoes are a common product, but different types of shoes are produced for different groups of people depending on their needs and purchasing power. So look around you. Shoes are a common product, but we don't have just one universal shoe. You know why? Because people have different needs and incomes, taste and lifestyle. So producers create different products for different groups. Let's look at the four examples given down here. The first one is school shoes are produced for students. They are usually simple in design, durable and affordable. So school shoes need to survive walking, running, school activities and everyday use, and they have to function for one whole year, and they also need to be affordable for families. So the producer considers the needs and purchasing power of students and their families. The second one is office wear shoes are made for working professionals. These shoes focus on comfort, formal appearance, and quality, often using leather or polished materials. An office worker may need shoes that look formal and professional. So the product is designed differently. The producer considers appearance, comfort, quality, and the expectations of that consumer group. Likewise, the third example is of sports shoes. Sports shoes are produced for athletes, fitness enthusiasts, and they are designed with special rubber soles and lightweight materials to provide grip, flexibility, and support. So, a runner doesn't simply need a shoe that looks good, they need a shoe designed for movement. And the textbook explains that sports shoes use features such as special soles and lightweight materials to provide grip, flexibility, and support. So, once again, different consumers, different requirements, and different products. Moving further with the fourth example, casual shoes or slippers are produced for daily use by people and need to be comfortable yet affordable. So, these are everyday use products. So, consumers may prioritize comfort and affordability. The producer designs the product accordingly. So, class 9, don't memorize four types of shoes separately. Understand the logic here. Different people have different needs and different purchasing power. Therefore, different products are produced for different groups. That's what for whom to produce actually means. Moving further to understand the concept even more depth here, the decision for whom to produce also affects the material used. Interesting, isn't it? The target consumer or customer can influence what materials go into the product. For example, a premium product may use different materials from an affordable everyday product. The producer has to balance quality, cost, consumer needs, and purchasing power, like given in the example of the shoes over here. Okay, now school shoes have to be affordable. They can be made out of any material. But when we talk about office wear shoes, they have to be formal and comfort, and the material used here could be leather and it should be polished one. And the cost of the office wear shoes are much higher than the cost of a school shoe over there. So The type of material varies according to the need and the purchasing power of the person over there. Okay. So moving further, for instance, leather shoes are generally targeted at office goers and high income customers, whereas rubber or synthetic shoes are aimed at sport players, factory workers, or people who need affordable and durable footwear. So, the textbook is showing us how the intended consumer group can influence the product. Like I gave you examples in the school shoes and the formal wear, different materials can be selected depending on purpose, durability, cost, and the customers being served. Again, the central question here is who are we producing? And like the example given, leather shoes are for office wearers, whereas rubber and synthetic shoes are for sport players, factory workers, or people who need affordable and durable footwear over there. Moving further, producers analyze what consumers like, how much money they have, and how much demand there is before deciding what to make. So, this is where economics meet real business decisions. Imagine you want to start a shoe company. Would you make 10,000 pairs of expensive formal shoes without knowing whether people want them? Probably not. You would want to understand what do customers like, what designs can I make, what can they afford, how much demand exists, and this is why businesses study consumers and markets before deciding what actually to produce. So this makes sure that limited resources are used well and not wasted. And now we come back to the foundation of the entire chapter. That is, resources are limited. So producing goods that people don't need or cannot afford could lead to resources being actually wasted. Therefore, understanding who the product is for helps producers use resources more effectively. Okay, so I hope you have understood what to produce and for whom to produce clearly. If you have any doubts over this topic, please put that in the comment section, to which I'll be definitely replying to all of you. Moving further, to go with yet another activity given down here is to think about a small information and a question given on that. The question is, should the government allocate more funds to healthcare and education or to defense and space exploration? Why or why not? Now, this is an interesting question that has been given on the funds of the government where it has to be allocated. So, what could be your answer here? There is no single answer that can apply in every situation because the government has limited resources, so it has to consider different priorities. Healthcare and education are essential for people's well being and they are a kind of long term development. But at the same time, defense is important for national security, while space exploration can contribute to scientific knowledge, technology, and future development. So, the government should consider the country's current needs, available resources, urgency, long term benefits, opportunity cost, and national priorities. So, a balanced and evidence based allocation of resources would be important rather than simply choosing one sector and ignoring the others. And notice what just happened. You didn't give a simple answer saying that healthcare is better. You thought like an economist. You considered alternatives, benefits, opportunity cost, and long term consequences. Okay, so so far we have asked what should we produce and for whom should we produce. But now imagine you have decided I am going to produce shoes. There is still one huge question, which is have to produce. So, in this have to produce, the main focus is should I use more workers? Should I use machines? Should I use advanced technology? And that's our second major economic question have to produce. And let's decode this topic in depth. After deciding what to produce, the next question is how to produce it, which methods, resources, technology should be used. So once the product is decided, the producer has to decide the production method. For example, imagine a garment factory. It needs to decide should workers stitch most of the clothes manually or should machines do most of the work? What technology should be used and what are the other resources needed? So what to produce is which product, but how to produce is which method. And that is the difference that you have to keep in your mind. For example, whether a manufacturer should automate process or employ more labor for producing goods. So this is a fantastic example, like I already connected it with a garment manufacturer here. We have already done it. So it has two broad possibilities. It can either hire more labor, okay, employ more workers and use more manual processes, or it can take up more machines, use automation and technology. Neither is automatically the correct answer. The producer has to examine the circumstances, and that's why we need to understand the factors of production here. So, moving ahead to understand the figure 8.6 that has been given in your textbook, which abbreviates on the concept called as factors of production. Now, look at this image. It is showing us four factors of production, which include land, labor, capital, and technology. Let's understand each one of them. So, talking with the first factor of production, which includes land, the image shows agricultural land, water, and natural surroundings. In economics, land refers to natural resources that are used in terms of production. So, for a farmer, land is obviously essential, but natural resources such as water and other resources are also important for production. Likewise, let's understand the concept of labor. Look at the workers in the picture. Labors mean efforts put by the human for the production activity. It can be either physical effort or it could be the mental effort. A farmer, a teacher, a doctor, a factory, and an engineer, all of them contribute to the major factor of production called as labor. Moving ahead to understand the capital here. Now look at the machines, factories, and equipment. Capital refers to human made resources used in production. For example, machines, tools, equipment, and buildings used for production. Remember, capital in economics does not simply mean money. That's a common confusion most of you have. Capital can be the tools, equipments, and all. Moving ahead, know the technology. And finally, look at the computers, robots, satellites, and scientific equipments. Technology refers to the knowledge, methods, and techniques used to produce goods and services. And technology help producers improve efficiency, quality, speed, as well as productivity. Okay. Now, here, think of a farmer. He needs land where production happens and with the help of natural resources. He also requires labor who can help in producing crops. He requires capital investment where he can buy machines and other equipments to ease his production activity. Likewise, he would need technology that can help him to sell his produce easily in the market. So these are factors of production which are shown in figure 8.6. Okay, and these are very much important. So remember these factors of production. Moving ahead, to answer this question, producers must select a right mix of factors of production: land, labor, capital, and technology. So, producer doesn't simply choose machines or workers. The producer has to decide a right combination. For example, a small handmade craft business may rely heavily on skilled workers. A large automobile factory may depend much more on machines and technology. So the right combination depends on the type of production. Okay. So production can be labor intensive using more workers and less machinery, or capital intensive using more machineries and technology and less workers. So this gives us two important terms. One is labor intensive. Labor intensive means more workers with less machine. For example, agricultural activities, okay, which are heavily dependent on human labor. Second one is capital intensive, which means more machines and technology with less labor over there. For example, large scale automobile industries. So remember, labor intensive means more workers, capital intensive means more machines. Okay, moving further, usually economic activities related to agriculture and handicrafts rely more on labor, whereas industries such as steel and automobile manufacturing depend more on machinery. So NCRT is giving us examples so that the difference becomes easier for us to visualize. Think about handicrafts. A skilled artisan may personally make a product where it involves significant human effort. Now think about a huge automobile manufacturing plant. It uses machines and technology to produce vehicles on a large scale. So the nature of the activity influences the production method. But there's an important point. Labor intensive does not mean no machines, and capital intensive doesn't mean no workers. It's about which factor is used relatively more heavily for the production activity to take place. Okay, so let's go further. However, the choice of production technique employed depends on the cost of capital, choice of technology, and the nature of the product here. So, this is where economic becomes a decision making subject. A producer has to consider several things. Okay, what are those? How expensive are machines? The cost of capital. What technology is available? Choice of technology. What kind of product? The nature of product. For example, a handmade designer dress may require skilled workers because every piece is customized. But millions of standardized products may be better suited to machines. So there isn't one production method that works for every business. The availability of various factors of production and their relative cost, and the laws as well as regulations in the country determine the decision by enterprises to address this key question. Now, add three more considerations. Okay, so what are those three more considerations? The first one is availability of various factors of production, which means skilled workers, machines, and necessary technology. Second one is their relative cost, which means is the production cost cheaper or more practical under circumstances. Third one is laws and regulations in the country. So businesses must follow the laws and regulations of the country. So the decision about how to produce is not made randomly. It involves analyzing several factors. Okay. For example, a garment manufacturer must choose between labor intensive and capital intensive methods of production. So let's imagine we own a garment factory. We have to make two broad choices. Either we produce garments with the help of workers or with the help of machines. So now let's see what might influence the decision. If machines are expensive, the firm will rely more on labor. But if machines become affordable, it may shift to automation. So simple logic applied here is the cost of the product. What is the capital investment going down over here? If machines are expensive, then the company may prefer to use more of labor. But if machines become cheaper and more affordable, then the company will shift to machines. So the relative cost of factors of production is what helps you decide whether you want to go ahead with labors or you want to go ahead with the machines. The choice also depends on the level of technology available. Advanced technology encourages more machine use, while limited technology leads to manual production. So, yet another choice is between the type of technology and the level of technology, whether it is advanced or whether it is a basic technology. Let's understand this with an example. Imagine a company wants to use a highly advanced machine, but the technology isn't available to them. Can they use it? No. So the available level of technology matters. Advanced technology available, greater possibility of use of machine. Limited technology, greater dependence on manual methods and on human labor. The nature of product is important too, as customized or designer clothes require skilled labor, whereas mass produced garments are better suited for machines. So imagine you are making one unique designer dress. It might require skilled workers to carefully create and customize it. But now imagine producing 1 million identical t shirts. In that case, you need machines, which may be much more suitable for large scale standardized production. So the product itself influences how to produce and what would be your factor of production here. Additionally, if labor is cheap and easily available, labor intensive methods are preferred. But if labor is costly and scarce, machines become more efficient. So again, compare the cost here. If workers are easily available and relatively affordable, which means they're available at a cheaper wages, a business may rely more on labor. But if workers are difficult to find and their wages are high, the business may consider greater use of machines and technology. But remember, the actual choice depends on the whole situation. There is no universal rule saying machines are always better or workers are always better. Economics asks which choice makes the best use of the available resources under the given conditions. So, government laws and regulations such as labor laws and incentives for machinery also influence this decision. So, finally, businesses don't operate in a vacuum of their own world. They have to follow government rules and regulations. For example, laws related to labor, okay, which decides on the accessibility of labors and how businesses should employ their workers. Government incentives can also influence decision about adopting machinery or technology. So when a producer asks, how should we produce? The answer depends on not just one thing, but many more things. Okay. So imagine you are starting a bakery now. You have to decide how to produce a bread. Would you use a worker or a machine? Before deciding, what are you going to do? You are going to question a lot of things. First, how much does machinery cost? Are skilled workers available? What technology is available? What type of bread am I going to produce? What quantity am I producing? What laws and regulations definitely apply? That's economics in action. So, class 9, look at what we have achieved. We started with scarcity, which forced us to make choices, and economics asked three fundamental questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Let's say you want to open a school uniform company. I'll ask you three questions here. Question 1, you decide to manufacture school uniforms. What to produce is clarity, school uniforms. But how many, what type, and what quality? Should you stitch them manually? Is your question number 2, or use machines? And that's how to produce. And question number 3 is, are you producing premium uniforms for expensive private schools or affordable uniforms for a wider group of students? And that's your third question for whom to produce. See, you don't need a complicated economic situation. Even a simple school uniform business faces the three economic important questions that we are going to deal with this entire topic. So, class 9, today economics asks us three very simple questions: what, how, and for whom. But behind these three simple questions is a much bigger problem. We cannot produce everything for everyone in limited quantities. Resources are limited, so choices have to be made. And those choices involve trade offs, opportunity cost, and careful decisions about how resources should be used. But now I have one more question for you guys. Who actually makes these choices? Does the government, or do the buyers and sellers? Or can both government and the private sector play a role? That's where our next topic becomes really interesting. So, in the next video, we are going to discover the new topic called as economic system and how choices are made. Okay, so we will also understand which type of economic system India follows and why. So don't miss the next video. Like, subscribe, and join me on Let's Revise by Vidyashri Kadlibuddi. Until then, keep questioning, keep connecting, and keep revising. I am Vidyashri, and this is Let's Revise. Bye, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Let's Revise by Vidyashri, where we learn together, revise together, and succeed together. So, class 9, in our previous lesson, we discovered something really important. Every economy faces three big questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. But today, in this video, I have a question for you. Who decides the answers for these questions? Imagine two countries have exactly the same problem. Both have limited land, labor, money, and technology. But one country says the government will make most of the important economic decisions, whereas the other says let buyers and sellers decide through the market. And a third one says let's have both government and private businesses playing important roles. Interesting, right? Same basic economic problem, but different ways of solving it. And that's exactly what today's topic is about. economic system and how choices are actually made. So let's understand how different economies organize their resources and make choices for themselves. So, what is an economic system is the first thing that we are going to understand with the next paragraph that we are going to study. So, in an economy, the answers to these three questions depend on how the resources used to produce goods and services are organized and who controls the decision making regarding them. So remember our three questions: what, how, and for whom. Now imagine asking who gets to answer these questions. Is it mainly the government, or these decisions mainly are made by private businesses or consumers? Or do both have a role here? That depends on how the economy is organized. And that organization is what takes us to the term economic system. So let's understand what is the actual definition of the term economic system, which would be an important part for your examination. And that definition lies in these lines: the system that defines the mechanism for production, consumption, and distribution of goods, services, and resources is known as the economic system of a country. So, this is the definition you should remember for your exams. An economic system is basically the way a country organizes itself for production activity, for consumption, and for distribution. So, what is production? Production here means what and how goods and services are produced, and consumption means how people use these goods and services. Whereas distribution means how goods, services, and resources reach different people. So, think of an economic system as rules and arrangement through which an economy actually functions. And there is not just one type. The textbook introduces us to three broad types of economic system. Okay, and those three are the planned economy, the market economy, and a mixed economy. And here is the interesting part. You know what? They differ only in who makes the important economic decisions. Let's start with the system where the government has the strongest role, and we begin to understand the topic called as planned economy. And as I said you, the planned economy here, the government plays a major role. So remember, the economic decisions are taken by whom? It is taken by the government here. Let's understand this topic line by line. In a planned economy, a central planning authority of the government, such as Planning Commission, makes all the major economic decisions in the market, that is, what and how much will be produced, how they will be produced, and who will get to use them and at what prices. So think about three questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. And in a planned economy, all these decisions are largely made by the Central Planning Authority. And one such example is the Planning Commission, which is controlled by the government. So instead of leaving most decisions to individual businesses and consumers, the government takes a major role in planning the economy, where it can decide on the following things. Firstly, what should be produced, how much should be produced, how it should be produced, who should receive it, and then the prices at what it should be sold. So imagine a giant control room for the economy, and the government is making many of the major decisions. That's the very basic idea behind the planned economy here. Okay, moving ahead, the government has ownership in most resources and sectors like land, factory, bank, and transport. So here the government's role goes beyond simply making rules. The government has ownership in many important resources and sectors like factories, banks, transport, land, and other resources. So the public sector plays a very large role over here, and public sector means the role of government. Remember this. With limited private ownership, enterprises usually follow the central authority's targets rather than the market demand and are heavily regulated by the government through the strict permits and licenses to produce goods and services. So, private businesses have a very small role over here. Businesses have to follow the government plan and the target which is set by the government rather than responding to what actually the consumers want. So, the government may also regulate production through permit and license. Here, the entrepreneur cannot simply say, I want to start producing this tomorrow. They may need government approval and have to follow the rules set by the central government or the central authority. Okay. However, this prevents a large number of enterprises to operate in the market and thus restricts competition among private enterprises. Now, we get to know a possible problem here. If private enterprises face strong restrictions, then few businesses will enter the market. And if few businesses compete, there is less competition. Why does actually competition matter so much in businesses? Okay, imagine if there is only one company that is making school bags, would it have a strong reason to improve the quality of the bags or the designs of the bag? Maybe less than, maybe less. But if 10 companies were competing for your attention, then competition can push the businesses to improve their quality, offer better prices, innovate, and attract the customers as well. As a result, there is little motivation among enterprises to improve quality or innovate. Some examples of planned economies are former Soviet Union, North Korea, and Cuba. So here we have a very important connecting point to the previous lines that we have studied, which tells us that when competition is less, it reduces the pressure on the enterprises to improve. So if customers have very few alternatives, a producer may face less pressure to do better than the competition. So, the textbook highlights limited competition and weaker incentives for innovation as possible drawbacks of this system. And some of the examples of planned economies are the previous Soviet Union, North Korea, and Cuba. So, these are the examples to help us identify the concept. Remember one thing about planned economy. Major economic decisions are centrally planned by whom? By the government. Okay, so that's the entire story of the planned economy. Let's move to almost the opposite approach, and where we study about the next economy called as the market economy here. Okay, so in a market economy, the questions of what, how, and how much to produce are addressed mainly by the forces of demand and supply with little government intervention. So now imagine the government steps back from making most production decisions. Then who will decide? The demand and supply. And who creates the demand? Consumers. And they influence what they want to buy. And businesses respond to that demand with the help of the signals that the consumers are giving. For example, imagine students suddenly become crazy about a particular type of water bottle. Then the demand for that water bottle rises. Businesses will notice this demand and they will start producing more of that product and even create some innovations as well. So instead of central government authority saying produce exactly 10,000 bottles, the market plays a major big role in determining the production. Okay, so often the government acts like a referee in the football match. It ensures safety and law and order, and it does not control prices for the production. So this is one of the easiest analogies in the chapter. Think about a football match. Does the referee decide team A must score 3 goals? No, right? Does the referee decide this player should buy the ball? No. The players and teams play the game, but the referee ensures rules are followed, maintains order, deals with violation, and helps ensure fair play. So the textbook uses the example of football for the government's role in market economy, where the government plays the role of a referee like the football in the market economy by making rules, by maintaining order, by dealing with violation, where they also help in ensuring fair play over there. So to understand this topic even much better, let's understand figure 8.6 that 8.7 that has been given in the top in the lesson, where it speaks about role of government and private ownership in a market economy. Now look at the figure. It has two important arrows. The first one is blue color, the second one is beige color. The blue color represents the role of government in the market economy, whereas the beige color represents the role of private ownership in the market economy. Now, the government role says it ensures safety, law, and order without controlling the prices. So, the government still has an important role. It can decide the safety, it can make law and rule and orders, but it does not control the prices or what type of production should take place, like it was done in planned economy. Now, when we talk on the part of the private ownership, individuals and enterprises own factories, shops, and land, which means that private individuals and businesses can own productive resources, like they can have shop, factories, and land. Businesses can decide what to produce based largely on market conditions. So, figure 8.7 is basically saying market economy is always a combination of private ownership depending on the market decisions followed by the regulation of the government. So that's a very important picture. You should remember about the market economy here. So moving further to understand even more about the market economy here, the ownership of factories, shops and land and other resources largely rests with individuals and private companies. So this reinforces what we just saw in figure 8.7. Unlike the planned economy, the market ownership is much more important here. Individuals and companies can own businesses and productive resources. Many producers offer similar products which encourages better quality, lower prices and innovation in production of goods and services. So now imagine five companies selling smartphones. They all are trying to attract you. What they might do, they might improve the features, offer competitive prices, introduce new technology and even improve the design. But why do these companies do this? Because they are competing for customers. So competition can encourage businesses to improve and provide quality product to customers at an affordable price. Okay. Some of the prominent examples include the United States of America, Japan, Hong Kong. However, the governments play an important role even in these economies. So, what are the examples where we see the market economy dealing in certain countries are USA, Japan, and Hong Kong. But immediately after this, it makes an important point in the textbook. It says that, however, the government play an important role in these economies. This is very important. Don't make the mistake of thinking market economy is not equal to no government. That's not what the textbook says. It says government can still play a role over here. But how? They can make rules, they can protect consumers, they can maintain law and order, regulate competition, provide public services, and intervene in various ways. So, a market economy does not mean the government disappears. That observation prepares us perfectly for the third system, where we now move ahead to understand the third economy of the market economic system called as the mixed economy here. Okay, so let's decipher the concept of economy. A mixed economy combines features of both market and planned economies. So now we have reached the system that combines both approaches. Imagine taking government's role plus private sector and market forces and putting them together. That's called as mixed economy. The government plays an important role, but private individuals and businesses also participate in this economy. In this system, private individuals, enterprises, and the government play important roles in making economic choices and decisions. So, this is the key idea here. Economic decisions aren't controlled entirely by only one side, like only by the government or only by the private individuals. Instead, you have the role of the government, the role of the private individuals, the role of the private businessmen, all of them participating in the economy. So think both sides have a role in the mixed economy. We also find large public sector companies that play a very important role in this market. So a mixed economy can have large businesses owned by the government, which is called as the public sector, while the private businesses also operate, which are called as the private sector. So the economy can contain public sector as well as the private sector running smoothly here. In reality, most economies have features of mixed economic systems that allow the existence of private ownership with some degree of government regulation. So this is very important line for you to focus on. Real economies are often more complicated than textbook boxes. A country may have private business, private ownership, as well as market, along with which they might also have government regulation and public sector organization. So we should not imagine every economy as a fitting into a completely pure category. Okay, so let's understand figure 8.8 here, which has been given in the textbook for all of us. So let's decode this figure. Fine. So this is the figure 8.8, which generally shows the role of government and market in a mixed economy. So what do we see here? At center, the mixed economy is given, and on both the sides, there are some information given. On one side, we have the role of government. So this figure shows the government decides fair competition rules, which means the government can establish rules to support fair competition. Consumer protection, it can protect consumers from unfair practices. Transparency, it can promote transparency in economic activities. Public goods, the government can provide or support goods and services that serve society broadly. And the last one is welfare programs. The government can run programs aimed at social welfare. So the government isn't simply sitting outside the market, it has responsibilities also. So in a mixed economy, the government also has got a role to play. Likewise, we also have the market role to play, or the private individual role to play over here. Now, looking at this other side, the figure shows us three important features. The first one is profit making businesses, which means private businesses operate with profit as an important motive. Innovation. So, businesses can introduce new ideas, products, as well as technologies too. And then third one is competition. Different businesses compete with one another. So figure 8.8 is beautifully showing the central idea of mixed economy with government plus market. Not one instead of the other, both play an important roles over here. Okay, so moving further to understand a few examples that practice mixed economies in the world is a few examples of mixed economies include India post 1991, China post 1978, Germany, and Sweden. So the textbook gives us these examples and then it makes another important observation. The observation is even market economies like United States of America and Singapore have significant government involvement in the market. This reinforces an important lesson. Don't think of market economy as zero government. Governments can have significant roles even in economies that rely strongly on market. So the real world is more nuanced than simply government or market. Whereas in India, and what happened in India? Did India always have the same economic system? No. Let's follow the journey. India's economic system has evolved over the time in response to changing needs and challenges, which means that over the period, the role of the Indian government has kept on changing over here. Fine. And India has developed into a mixed economy over the period of time. Fine. So moving further to understand the role of India's economy over the period of time here, which has been given into extra information in the concept under don't miss out. So India's economic system has evolved over time in response to changing needs and challenges. This means that India's economic system did not remain exactly the same as the country faced needs, problems and challenges. Its economic policies also changed. In the decades after independence, India followed a more state led approach similar to a planned economy. So, after independence, India gave a major role in economic planning and it was played by the government. The country wanted to develop important sectors and build its economic foundation. So, India's approach was more state led, which means it was a planned economy where the government played a major role. The government played a major role in controlling industries, allocating resources, and regulating production through license and permits, while many key sectors such as banking, transport, heavy industries were dominated by the public sector. So, this sentence gives us a clearer picture. The government played a major role in almost all the sectors, and several other important sectors of services were controlled by the public sector. So, India's economy had many features associated with a more state-led approach that is controlled by the government. But in 1991, something changed. However, by 1991, the country faced serious economic difficulties. India reached a difficult economic situation by 1991, and when circumstances changed, economic policies may also need to change. This became a major turning point. And as a result, the government introduced major economic reforms that reduced excessive regulation, encouraged private enterprise, opened the economy to global trade and investment, and increased competition. So the sentence in the source continues with the reforms, including reducing excessive regulation, encouraging private enterprises, opening economy for global trade and investment. And very recent movie that I have watched over the period of 1991 is in the Prime Video called as The Governor. You all must watch this video to understand why in the year 1991 liberalization was actually adopted by the government, and why private enterprises was introduced, and why global trade and investment was encouraged in our country. So this is an important transition. You know why? The reforms aim to reduce excessive controls and make it easier for economic activity to respond to market forces. They also encourage private enterprise, open the economy more to global trade and investment, and increased competition. Think of it as a moving way from system with a very heavy government control toward a system where the market and private enterprises had a large role, and the government continued to remain important. So these reforms gradually shifted India towards a more market oriented system while still retaining an important role for government. You will study more about these changes in your higher grades. And this one sentence tells us something extremely important about India's present economic structure. India moved towards greater market orientation, but the government did not disappear. The government continues to have important responsibilities. That is why the textbook places India among the examples of mixed economy. Okay, so this is a very easy way to remember. Think of India's journey, earlier more state-led, but 1991 reforms, and today India is an example of mixed economy. Okay, so let's focus on a let's explore question that has been given in your textbook. And the question is, in your opinion, should the government completely stay out of enterprise decision? And the answer to this question is no. The government should not completely stay out of enterprise decision. Businesses should have freedom to make many production and investment decisions, especially for market-oriented economy. But government has an important role in making fair competition rules, protecting consumers, ensuring transparency, enforcing laws, and protecting public interest. Okay. And then moving ahead, can you think of an example where government action helped or harmed an industry or a sector? So one example where government action can help a sector in when the government provides support, infrastructure, and incentives or clear rules that can encourage investment and development. For example, support for renewable energy can encourage businesses to invest in solar and other clean energy products. On the other hand, in excessive regulations or complicated approval processes can sometimes make it difficult for businesses to operate or expand. Therefore, government action can have positive and negative effects depending on its design, implementation, and the situation. So, coming down to the end of this entire chapter, this chapter has shown us that economics is essential about making choices in the world of scarce resources and unlimited wants. So, we understood that resources are limited and there are unlimited wants. There are individuals, enterprises, and governments must constantly decide how to best use all the available resources, keeping in mind the opportunity cost of each decision. And these choices are reflected in three key economic questions: what to produce, how to produce, and whom to produce, for whom to produce. And different economic systems like the planned economic system, the market economic system, and the mixed economic system, where it also helps us appreciate how everyday decision, public policies, and economic systems together shape the production, distribution, and resources of an economy. And that's why economic systems actually matter. So this is the end of your chapter. So class 9, today we discovered something much bigger than three definitions. We discovered that economics isn't just about money banks, or prices. It's fundamentally about choices. And different societies organize those choices differently. A planned economy gives us much larger role to government planning. A market economy relies more heavily on demand, supply, and private decision making, and a mixed economy brings the two together. And India's own economic journey shows us that economic system can evolve as a country's need and challenges change. So here is your final question for today. If scarcity forces us to make choices and economic systems decide how those choices are organized, which system do you think gives the best balance between economic freedom and social welfare? Think about it. Because economics isn't about memorizing answers, it's about learning to ask better questions. And if this explanation helped you understand the chapter instead of just memorizing it, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and don't stop here. We have now completed the major building blocks. Okay. And in my next video, we are going to start with the next chapter. So make sure you join me in the next video. Until then, keep questioning, keep connecting, and keep revising. I'm Vidyashri, and this is Let's Revise. Bye, everyone.